Yes, drum roll. I would like to introduce Millie T. and have her give her view of what happened in the 2024 award season, most especially at this year's Oscars. Millie, take it away.
Thank you. How's everyone doing? That's great. Welcome to the SWAN Sweet 16 event. I'm your host, yes, Millie Tamarez, and I'm so glad that Jan introduced me as a comedian because usually when I do events and people see me and hear that I'm going to perform, they see a fat, eccentrically dressed woman and they're like, this woman's going to sing her fucking heart out. I think I'm going to sing really well, and guess what? I can't sing. I'm not a singer. I'm a comedian, and I think the highest note I can get, because people obviously have this conception that I'm going to be a good singer, and the highest note I can sing is probably like something that Drake can hit, which is relevant because SWAN is turning 16 years old. Speaking of rappers who were caught communicating via text message with minors, SWAN, Support Women Artists Now, is 16. It's been 16 years of supporting women artists. SWAN is young, fresh-faced, but sadly just aged out of being a Nickelodeon TV star. Sorry, Dan Schneider. Sorry, she said go in, so I'm going to go in. I'm sorry. The whole thing's going to be like this. And everything I'm saying is true. Surely, if we've been at work for 16 years, there wouldn't even be a need for an organization like this to highlight women identifying artists anymore, right? Surely, in 16 years, equality has been achieved. Just like racism ended when Obama became president, right? It's not funny. That's real. Let's take a look at our award season this year. This year, Quinta Brunson became the first Black woman in over 40 years to win Best Lead Actress in a Comedy Series for the Emmys for Abbott Elementary. 40 years. A Black woman hasn't been considered funny to the Emmys in over 40 years. How many presidents has that been? At this rate, I'll win an Emmy when I'm in my 70s. If you're trying to deduce how old I am, just stop. This Gap Tooth smile has deceived all of my managers and agents, and I feel like I'm still going out for high school roles, so that's not a joke. Okay, that's not a joke. I'm 15. Back to the Emmys. This year, unlike any other year, every single award that wasn't explicitly for a woman, that wasn't Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress, went to a man. Best Variety Special went to a man. Best Directing went to a man. Best Writing for a Limited Series Movie or Drama Special, you guessed it, went to a man. It's not even that all these awards are going to men and they're male heavy. It's that the kinds of shows that are winning are super focused on the deep examination of masculinity. Like the best drama for Emmy winning drama this year was Succession. Everyone is bending over backwards calling Succession the most complex show of all time, when really it's about Caucasian adult children trying to get the love and affection and respect of their racist, misogynistic father. We already have that playing out in real life, and it's called the Trump family. And just like in the show Succession, in the Trump family, the daughter is the least embarrassing. Although in the show Succession, Siobhan doesn't have a former classmate telling of reporters that allegedly Shiv farted in class, but instead of taking responsibility for it, blamed her female classmate and let that girl get bullied all year, which is a real allegation against Ivanka Trump, is that she farted and said it was someone else, and that girl got bullied all year. Where's the Emmy on that fart story? I want to see how that plays out. Support women artists now. Even the Emmy nomination for Best Comedy this year went to a man, and it went for The Bear, a story about a tortured man who has to fight against his toxic masculine tendencies to be the best chef in River North Chicago. We're supposed to root for this guy who yells at his employees and has no work-life balance because he's trying. On everyone's way over here, you walk probably by several women selling churros and other items in the subway with more complex interiority who are supporting their families in the U.S. and abroad while making sure food's on the table and selling you those churros with a smile. But because they're not young white men, it's not considered art or deep struggle. Where's the Emmy for that? Let's move on to the Golden Globes. Did anyone watch the Golden Globes this year? No? Okay, well, if you did, you would have caught Joe Coy, who's a comedian, and he had a very uncomfortable opening monologue. In his opening monologue, when one of his jokes didn't land well, he flailed badly and blamed the flop of the joke on his bad writing team. What an amateur. See, I'm a woman, I didn't have any writing team, and I just want you to know if a joke doesn't land, it's totally my responsibility. And also yours is for not laughing. Why is that the biggest laugh, guys? Come on. But unlike me, Joe Coy doesn't have a gap-toothed smile to lean back on. Okay, but back to the Golden Globes. The Golden Globes this year is bouncing back from the 2021 Los Angeles Times expose that revealed that the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, which serves as the voting body for the awards, had 0 black members. That was in 2021 that it came out, right? Which sounds about right when you consider that Jason Sudeikis won the Golden Globe Award for Best Comedy in an Actor Series for the show Ted Lasso 2 years in a row. Clearly, only white people are doing that. But let's talk about this year's Golden Globes, which in terms of nomination were at least better than some other award shows. Yes, white men won the majority of Golden Globes, but at least Celine Song and Greta Gerwig were nominated for Best Director, which is more than we can say about the Oscars. Let's go to the Oscars. The Oscars in 2024, after the 2023 movie season, was supposed to be the year of the woman. Beyonce and Taylor Swift sold out tours around the world that literally affected entire economies. Barbie made record numbers and had the biggest marketing campaign that we've ever seen in a long time. For months, it felt like you couldn't go outside without seeing bubblegum pink everywhere. Pepto-Bismol was surrounding the streets. Speaking of stomach aches, let's talk about the Oscars. If 2023 and 2024 were supposed to be the year of the woman, you certainly could not be able to tell from the damn Oscars. Nothing is more indicative than the Best Picture nominees. Whether we like it or not, nominees for the Best Picture tend to be a snapshot of cultural attitudes and impact in a given moment. The most effective films pose a mirror to society and ask society a question. Let's go through some of the messages of each Best Picture nominee. Spoiler alert, I'm going to spoil it for you, which I'm going to go through right now. American Fiction, which is a wonderful film that makes a lot of great points of what it means to be a black male artist. You can tell that both the main character and the writer has a sort of disdain for successful black women, but of course it doesn't take any time to unpack it. Instead, it spends the whole time thinking about how white people react to the work, which I don't know how that's not white supremacy, but whatever. Then you have Killers of the Flower Moon, which is an incredible depiction of the brutal murders of the Osage, but also how greedy white men ruin everything. The movie ends with a drone shot of a present-day Osage gathering, a whirling and unbroken circle of dancers binding their community together. What you don't see, this is true, is that eventually the drone pans to the land of the famous Food Network celebrity chef, the Pioneer Woman, whose home is on Osage land. And that's because, yes, in fact, Ree Drummer's family began growing wealth through Osage dealings and amassing the property that placed them on the top 100 landowners in the country. To be fair, though, this is true, her recipe for pork chops in a garlic red wine reduction sauce is very delicious, and I do recommend you guys try it. It will impress anybody who comes over and eat. Then you have the nomination for the film Maestro, which poses the question, what does it look like when a man is never told the word no? And no, I'm not talking about the film's iconic subject, Leonard Cohen, but instead the lead actor, director, and writer, Bradley Cooper, who turned a great man's life into a complete plotless nonsense. And the whole movie is watching Mr. Cooper spiral in real time with a prosthetic nose. Past Lives is a great film written and directed by Celine Song, starring Greta Lee, about how reconnecting with a hot guy from your 8th grade class who is both too chicken shit to actually pursue you, but also too self-absorbed to leave you and your incredibly patient husband alone can fuck up your life. Then you have The Holdovers, a holiday film that shows the softer side of a rude asshole teenagers, teenage boys, and adult men. Some may say Paul Giamatti deserved an acting award for that weird contact lens he put on so he can have a lazy eye. But the one that got the Oscars was Divine Joy Randolph, who won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress or Best Actress in a Supporting Role. C. Alexander Payne. Incredible things can happen when you acknowledge the existence of Black people, which is the first time he ever did that in his entire career. Okay. We got a lot of Sideways fans here. No Black people in Sideways. Then you have Anatomy of a Fall, the French foreign film that begs the question, how rad would it be to push your annoying ass husband out of a window and get away with it? Let's clap for that film. Even though it will never pass the Bechdel test, it did win Best Original Screenplay. Then there's Zone of Interest, a film that puts the banality of evil on full display. But it does incredible work by making you feel bad for a literal Nazi commandant because his wife is annoying. True story. When I saw that movie, I saw it in Cobble Hill Cinema, which is the smallest theater in New York City that I've ever been to. And I snuck in a Bodega Hero under my jacket and crispy chips because I was intending to eat it during the film. What I didn't know was that, this is so true, guys, I'm being vulnerable. What I didn't know is that the part of the film's appeal is the quietness. So much so that it won an Oscar for sound design. So my friend who was with me said she was stressed out by watching this movie showing the horrors of Auschwitz, but also stressed because I was trying to eat this sandwich quietly. Art connecting to life, guys. Then we have Poor Things, which some may laud as the ultimate feminist piece. But is it? The film asks the question, what happens when the woman has a literal brain of a baby and therefore would act on her impulses without any of the societal pressures of what it means to be a proper woman? And also it asks, what would an 18th century woman do with all this freedom? And the film's answer to it is just to have a lot of sex with men with weird penises. You can tell, thank you for clapping. Thank you for clapping. You can tell that the super feminist Poor Things was both written and directed by men, because if you asked a woman what she would do if she was untethered by society, it would be to A, either take an uninterrupted nap on an exotic beach, or B, push her annoying husband out of a window and get away with it, just like in Anatomy of a Fall. Speaking of feminism, we have Barbie, which despite being the biggest movie of the year, only got 8 nominations, none of which going to the star Margot Robbie or to director Greta Gerwig. Barbie got a lot of criticism from people, saying that it did not go nearly deep enough about what it means to be a woman, as it should have, and that the entire film was Feminism 101. But in a country that recently overturned Roe versus Wade, is trying to ban birth control, is trying to ban in vitro fertilization, is trying to ban no-fault divorces, and has one of the highest maternal death rates in any developed nation, don't you think people need to sit their asses down and take Feminism 101 all over again? Clearly, people were not paying attention in class. They need to see Feminism 101 over and over again until it sticks. And to be honest, Barbie has a more nuanced take on what it means to be a woman than the critically acclaimed Poor Things. Because yeah, it does have some strides to make, because Ken doesn't get pushed out of a window, just like the iconic Anatomy of a Fall. Speaking of men I want to push out of a window, let's go to the big Oscars winner, Oppenheimer. It's so emblematic of 2024 Oscar celebration to celebrate all things white men. There were so many white men in the film Oppenheimer, I thought I was at a reunion concert for the hip-hop group A Tribe Called Quest. Oppenheimer, the film, was nominated for 13 Oscars and won seven. Oppenheimer, the film that was nominated for 17 Oscars and won 7, takes us on the journey of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the American theoretical physicist who helped develop the first nuclear weapons during World War II. I'm not sure what he actually did, though. It seems like most of the film, he was just putting a team together, like a really drawn-out Avengers. I can't believe this boring-ass movie won anything. If I wanted to know the inner thoughts of a white male project manager, I'd log into LinkedIn. Thank you. The only women in Oppenheimer were either drunk, naked, or communist, which actually just sounds like my neighborhood in Bushwick, so no complaints here. That actually does sound like women that I know. I'm just so glad that in the Year of the Woman, such an important piece for white men is getting the recognition they deserve. I feel like this year's Oscar were penance for last year's Oscar, in which mother-daughter drama Everything Everywhere All at Once swept. It's like punishment for Asian women getting awarded, so let's elevate the story of the man who did one of the most horrific things to Asian people in history. And let's give that story 7 awards. Thank you. But it's okay, because half of the movie is about how bad Oppie feels about destruction of a bunch of people. He's Knuff, guys. Let's remember that. Anyway, if this is the Year of the Woman, I'm truly concerned of next year, for when next year is the Year of the White Man. Thank you so much. I'm Millie Tamaris.
This is what it's come to, huh? You are the only living soul I can tell my secret to. I painted every single one of them. Every big eye. Me. And no one will ever know but you.
Hello. My God.
Hello.
So I just want to say, Larry, as brilliant as I thought this was 10 years ago, having lived through the last 10 years with the Weinstein issues, the Me Too issues, followed by the Trump issues, this could not be more relevant. And I am so, so proud that you are here today to hear us love you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
Okay, take it away.
I will give you a lot of credit in that that literally when we showed this movie 10 years ago in that theater, you were the first person to come up to me, and you did not know me, and I think you might have even hugged me or something. You were just so...
I threw myself at him at the doorway.
Yeah.
I tackled him at the door.
Literally said it was... you were the person who understood this movie better than anybody else at that time period, and you're so correct. I mean, the movie was not a big hit of any kind, but when everything went down a few years later, Scott and I were like, oh my God, we kind of really did write the first movie of that whole movement. And I think a lot of people at the time didn't get it and didn't really understand the dilemma that Margaret was going through. A few years later, they got it really a lot better.
Okay, so Leah, we know you've been, I gotta remember, not an actress. I got to remember to look forward and not back. But Leah, we know you've been on set, and it's incredibly generous of you to fit all this into your very crazy schedule. There's a wonderful interview with Leah in FF2 Media, and Margaret actually made a painting of Leah's eye, and you can see it. Leah has generously allowed us to post it on FF2 Media, and you can see it, and it's doing gangbusters at Celebrate Women Artists on website today.
Should I start the presentation?
Yes, you should.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Leah. I'm going to share my screen so you can see the presentation I've put together. I hope you enjoyed the film. I was the still photographer on the film. In fact, I took the photos of Margaret and Walter that you see here in the poster for the film. A lot of people here, I take stills on a film set and they have no idea what that means. So the main function of my role is to take photos that represent the film as closely to the camera as possible. Something like this. A good chunk of the photos that you see online or in magazines and newspapers promoting movies were taken by somebody like me. Another important job of mine is to document the filmmaking process, show the behind the scenes. This is my favorite part of the job. It dovetails nicely with my background in photojournalism. Here's a photo that's considered behind the scenes, you know, Tim looking at the actors right before a take, or, you know, to set up the camera. Another important aspect of my job is shooting prop photos, photos that will appear in the film, like on the walls. There's a lot of those in this one. And this one, for example, was actually a real photo that I think of the real Walter Keane that I've taken a photo of Christoph Waltz and comped his head onto Walter's actual body. And so that was a fun one. There was a whole bunch of those face replacements. So, and then there's other photos like this, which was from the Polaroids that they're flipping through from their vacation. You take all those. And, you know, the pictures that appear in the newspapers in the film, that's also part of my job. On this particular film, I did a portrait series of the characters. So here's a photo of me from the shoot with young Jane, played by Delaney Ray. In general, my stills and behind the scenes photos, as I mentioned, can be used in magazines or online or as promotion. But on some of the bigger films like Big Eyes, they can appear in making of books, such as this one, which you know, I believe Jan's already talked to you about, and somebody won one in a raffle. Filmmaking is a strange and unique process, and I try to show that in my images. I've always liked this particular image because it shows a bit of the organized chaos of filmmaking. It's also a good example of the ratio of men to women on set. There's always so many more men than women, which brings me to the theme of the presentation and screening, celebrating women in film. So the next thing I'm going to do is go through 6 incredible women who worked on Big Eyes. And the first, of course, is Margaret Keane. The first of 3 Margarets I'm going to talk about, the real Margaret Keane. She's why we're all here. Talk about a strong woman in the face of adversity, the inner strength it must have taken for her to stand against a man who emotionally abused her in a time when even less receptive to women's rights than exists today. She said in an interview that Jane was the ultimate impetus for that she had to protect her child. And the fact that later she was able to reclaim her own artwork and fight Walter on that is, I think it's pretty special. So here's Margaret with Amy at the gallery with one of her paintings. Now, you all know the story of Margaret Keane, at least if you didn't fall asleep during the screening, you know it. But I did want to talk about my brief personal meeting with Margaret. She was so quiet and lovely and also extremely generous. She invited the crew to her gallery. She gave everyone lithographs and signed them for anyone who wanted them signed, which I thought was really generous of her to spend the time. When she visited set for her cameo, she was delighted to be there. She was just kind of quiet, witnessing it all, and I think she was so happy to see that Scott and Larry were doing justice to her story. It's a testament to them both that they managed to win her trust. Right here, I have Margaret on set with Larry. Unfortunately, Scott's not in this picture. Sorry, Scott. She was just such a lovely woman, and it felt like an honor to meet her. I know Scott and Larry mentioned how nervous they were at the screening of the film with Margaret, but then, you know, she and Jane absolutely loved it. I'm so happy for her that she was able to be validated in that way and see her story come to life on screen. On to the next Margaret. This is a nice transition for it. Our on-screen Margaret, Amy Adams. Most of you have heard of her. She's been nominated for 6 Academy Awards and 7 BAFTAs. She's an incredible actress, and her acceptance of the role helped to get the film funded. She had once turned down the part, but later reconsidered it after she became a mother, which she said helped her better connect to Margaret's character. She said she understood the nuance better, which she had originally read as a lack of confidence was actually much more complex, that Margaret was a dimensional being, a mother, an artist, and a woman. What Amy portrayed in Margaret is something I see in Amy herself, a quiet strength and a master in her field. Yet she's so humble and down to earth, the crew absolutely loved her. I picked Amy to spotlight because, well, she's Amy Adams and the star of the show. Who wouldn't want to spotlight her? But also because she successfully navigates that difficult balance of being a mother, an artist, and a woman. And I can very much relate to the joys and struggles of that. And on to our final Margaret, Lisa Godwin. Lisa created all the in-between stages of Margaret's art, and Amy herself referred to Lisa as the film's own Margaret Keane. Lisa has been working in the film industry in the props department since 2001. On Big Eyes, she was tasked with replicating the in-between stages of Margaret's work for the screen. She did hundreds of pieces. I watched her work once and was amazed at both how accurate and fast she was at taking a finished piece and going backwards with it, creating all kinds of versions of the painting in earlier stages. Then Amy Adams would take those in-between stages and often paint over top of them on the film. Lisa also created Keane-esque paintings of Jane, since the film versions of Jane didn't look exactly like the real one. So cheers to Lisa, an amazing artist in her own right. The next person I want to spotlight is Colleen Atwood. Colleen is a 12-time nominated, 4-time Academy Award winner for costume design. So suffice it to say, she's the best of the best. She had a career as a fashion advisor in the 70s and started in film in 1981, with her first costume designer credit only 3 years later in 1984 on Firstborn. She and Tim started working together in 1990 on Edward Scissorhands. They became frequent collaborators, including on Big Eyes. Next will just be pictures of some of the costumes she designed. Here's one actually that is also one of those prop photos that was hanging on the wall in Margaret's first apartment of her and her ex-husband. Anyway, Colleen designed both of these outfits just for the photo. Colleen is a force. She knows exactly what she wants and ensures that it happens. I have the greatest respect for how she has a vision, works collaboratively with the director and others, and then flawlessly executes it. Like here, another wedding dress for her to design. Plus, her team of people are always as amazing as she is. She and her team exhaustively research, sketch, plan, and implements, so that it's time appropriate, but also something unique. I'm always blown away by her extraordinary artistry. Next up is Lynette Howe-Taylor. She's a British producer who was the first producer Scott and Larry brought onto the film. Lynette's been a very successful in a male-dominated field. At the point where she was hired for Big Eyes, she had produced successful films like Blue Valentine and The Place Behind the Pines. She only picked projects she was passionate about, and she clearly has a really great sense of which scripts turn into fascinating and interesting movies. Since Big Eyes, she's gone on to produce many other successful films, including A Star is Born, for which she also received an Academy Award nomination. Lynette and Larry both served terms as governors together on the Academy Board, and Lynette produced the 92nd Academy Awards in 2020. I admired Lynette a lot on Big Eyes. She was always so kind and friendly and approachable. On top of that, she just had a baby and was juggling pumping and being a new mom while working, something I'd not seen before. And I know it wasn't easy for her. I could tell it wasn't easy, but she showed up with her whole self every day. 2 years later, when I was also a new mom with my first baby working on a film, I would remember Lynette. It gave me strength and fortitude knowing that she did it and survived it and helped keep me going. Just one of the many reasons she stands out in my mind as a strong, successful woman. She asked me to take this photo. She was a big fan of Terrence Stamp. And finally, woman I want to look at is someone I deeply admire, Katterly Frauenfelder. Katterly is the first AD on this film. That means assistant director. One of the first films she worked on was Blues Brothers in 1980. She worked up from a PA position, which means production assistant, lowest on the food chain, up through the ranks of ADs at a time where there were almost no female first ADs, and there still aren't a lot. She started working with Tim on Planet of the Apes and has worked on pretty much every project since. A lot of you may not know what a first AD does, which is basically run the set. Most people think the director does that, but the director is like the big ideas person, says what they want to happen, and then the first AD is the one who actually makes it happen, running all the sets and the many departments on it. They basically make the film happen from scheduling on down. They're involved in every aspect related to production during filming. Everything funnels to them. It requires an incredible amount of knowledge, organization, mental acuity, problem-solving skills, and it absolutely requires someone who commands respect. Katterly does that and more, and yet remains warm and approachable. To achieve what she has is a feat for a woman in such a male-dominated field. I have mad respect for her, and I think anyone who has worked with her would agree. I'm ending with this photo of me and Kat on a Big Eyes location where we were acting these temporary stand-ins or maybe just holding up the thing on the wall. I'm not really sure what we were doing. But I love working with her, and I hope I get another chance someday. In summary, women rock. Thanks for listening to my presentation, and that's all I've got.
My God, Leah, that was fantastic. I haven't seen a lot of those pictures in a billion years, and so I mean, I just went on a total nostalgia trip looking at all those faces and that wonderful time we had in Vancouver.
Yeah, it was a lovely time. It was really special. It's really special working on that film.
Yeah. What was nice about working on that movie is that it was definitely like a lower budget movie for Tim Burton, and so the people working on it, nobody was working on it for a check. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone was there because they loved the story, they loved Margaret, and they loved it was a team that really wanted to be there. It wasn't a job for any person.
Yeah, in fact, I was going through some of my old notes, and like one of the things that I saw was that pretty much everybody who I talked to and interviewed for the book was just raving about working on the film, including Amy, who, just said she could tell how it was a passion project for everybody and that it was just a really special experience for her. And I think everybody who worked on the film felt that way.
One person I would love to is not a woman who worked on the film, but your husband. Who worked
Yes.
on it. And your husband was just an extraordinary champion.
Derek Fry.
of this
So when you saw
Derek
the
Fry.
producers at the beginning, you saw that one of the producers, executive producer, was Derek Fry, and that we are going to have a postscript tribute to the guys for Larry and Scott and Tim, and also Derek. I have a wonderful picture from an awards ceremony of the two of them together, so Leah and Derek. So yes, hand for Derek.
Derek was amazing because
I love my husband.
As Leah described, the AD being Tim's right-hand person, Derek is the person who controls communication to Tim. And so in order for us to get Tim to actually agree to, first he agreed to produce this movie, then he agreed to direct the movie, it needed a lot of support from Derek to sort of like actually go and plead the case. And he was definitely so strong on that. I really think he was one of the key people responsible for getting this movie made.
Yeah, he's a good one. He's
He's a keeper. Well, we're all into that. Okay, so does anybody here have any questions for Leah before we turn to the section where we're talking with Larry? Come on, there must be some questions. No? No questions.
I'm fine if there's not.
Okay, so I have the
One
last...
thing I want to say, one more thing about what one of the things that Leah talked about in that is the prop picture, the fake Margaret Keane paintings. What was really amazing about what that artist did is she created all those perfect copies of Margaret Keane's work. They were so perfect that unfortunately they all had to be destroyed.
Yeah.
Because they were basically forgeries. And that was one of the key things Margaret's gallery just didn't want to have happen, was to have the market flooded with just perfect level forgeries of her work. So after production was in the contract, after production was done, the ones that were the exact duplicates of Margaret's work had to be destroyed. And it was so sad because I think everyone in the crew was sort of like, can I take one home? Can I take one home? And you won't be able to take one home.
So on FF2 Media, if you go onto ff2media.com, you will find a wonderful profile by Julia over here, Julia Lasker, of Lisa Godwin with these pictures and the picture that Leah showed of her with that canvas. Again, the development, the incredible amount of hard work that Margaret had to do to create Tomorrow Forever, and then it was ripped down. Which we'll talk to Larry about as part of the screenplay. But we have a profile of her, and we also have an interview with more detail from Leah's question with Hannah. One of our other writers, Hannah, wrote a profile. Did an interview. Julia wrote a profile. We weren't able to reach Lisa. We tried. but we were able to interview Leah, and we have that posted also on the site. We have a profile of Colleen Atwood with making accommodation for the fact that we're used to thinking of her as designing the costumes for Alice in Wonderland and all kinds of other Tim Burton extravaganzas. So this was a rather ordinary set of costumes, except they're elegant and perfect, and I think we would all agree with that. So you want to know more about this? Again, we've done our homework and we've tried our best. Oh yeah, a question, yes.
Firstly, I want to say that this is an amazing achievement that was put together by all these extremely talented people, and I'm so glad that the film was made. I have two questions, actually. One is, I think it's a wonderful thing that a woman artist was made, a movie of this stature was made of a woman artist, and I was first going to ask you how either Tim Burton or
Well, we're not gonna. We're talking just to Leah now. Do you have a question for Leah? Because Larry's going to talk a lot about the origin of all of this.
all right. Well, I was just interested in knowing if there might be other women artists who might be inspired. In other words, would there be another woman artist who this talented crew of people would be interested in making a movie about?
Probably not, but
No, I'm saying I would say that there are lots of women artists over the years that deserve their own biopic.
For sure.
Whether Scott and I are the people to do it or not, but there are I would say hundreds perhaps.
So we want one of Lenora Carrington and another one of Ramiro Varga, who is just, Lisa just wrote two profiles, one of a new book about Remedios Varo and her relationship with Leonora Carrington. So there's two movies right now, right, Larry? Not that you're not doing anything else. Okay, so any more questions for Leah? Yes, Lisa.
So what was lovely film, and thank you for your presentation. What was your most memorable moment? Like something that stuck out as incredible or really odd?
I think it was more like, one of the nice things about this film was getting to spend time in Vancouver. I mean, I actually live here now, but one of the reasons that we moved here was because we really loved Vancouver when we were staying here for Big Eyes. But then it also took us to San Francisco and Hawaii. So it's not a particular moment, but it just had such beautiful locations that I really enjoyed working on. And the crew of people were just, as Larry was saying, it was a passion project. So everybody was, and actually I'm working with the set dresser who was on Big Eyes on the film I'm on now. And we were just sharing with each other, like how special that film was to both of us. And so even still people talk about it who worked on it. And it just had that air about it of being something, memorable and special.
And I'll say that it's something you touched upon in your presentation, Leah. The day that Margaret King came was
it's the cameo. Yeah.
I mean, Scott and I seem to specialize in movies based on true life stories, and anytime a real person who's being portrayed in the film shows up on set, the energy level goes to this, because you are dealing with the real person and the actress playing the person, and so it's just like you're basically feeling like you're a part of history, and it makes you feel so much more connected to the work, because you know that the person who it's about is giving you kind of a thumbs up to your portrayal of them. So it's a very special moment.
And she was so lovely that it always just makes you feel good, like you're making this movie and this person's actually really lovely and just a genuine, down to earth, kind person. And meeting her daughter too, Jane.
Yeah, Jane was there
as well. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Hello. You can hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. About how much does it cost to make a movie like that? And do you get like funding from different?
Well,
fundraisers?
wait. We're talking to Leah now.
I was talking to. Do you have to do anything like out of pocket costs?
No,
No.
no, that, I have to, we're very limited time here, so that's, Larry might have, but let's get to that. But right now,
Okay.
Leah, while Larry's talking, I would be so grateful to you if you would send the picture that Margaret made of your eye, which, as I mentioned, was posted on a site on Facebook called Celebration of Women Artists, and it's going like bankbusters. So I would love to have that painting.
Oh, there's your eye.
That's
I love
Larry's eye. Yes. Okay, so you can find that, and while Larry's talking, because we're into Larry's time now, and what we all want to know is how you and Scott stumbled on this story, or how you found the story. And just to give you just this little background, so the movie's about Andy Kaufman, the movie's about autofocus, the OJ trial. Larry and Scott have an incredible Dolomite. Is their name. In fact, the woman who did who did win Best Supporting Actress this year is someone that was in one of Larry and Scott's recent films, Dolomite is My Name, with Eddie Murphy. So you have not only created these incredible stories of these oddball characters, Ed Wood, etc., you can list them off, but also have incredible, rich, wonderful women characters, and a whole slew of Oscar nominations and Emmy nominations and Emmy wins for women and people of color in the OJ trial, Sterling K. Brown, and also Sarah Paulson, both won Emmys for their roles in the OJ story. And so, Larry, you are a champion of our purple world. So why don't you just take people
the way
through?
We found out about it, I was certainly well aware of the art because I grew up in the 70s, and there was a kind of that was the kind of art that was, it was in my house. I grew up very working class in Indiana, and I also happen to have a friend who was is a rock star, a guy named Matthew Sweet. He had a good run in the 1990s. His albums are pretty terrific. But somehow he became obsessed with Margaret's work, and also about the mystery of Margaret. I mean, even after the trial and the paint-offs and things like that, there was still all this kind of debate about who actually did it and this kind of thing. And so Matthew was a person who really dived into that. And when eBay came along, he sort of cornered the market in Margaret Keen's, because people would just like find these paintings when their grandfather would die, and they'd find the paintings in the basement and they wouldn't know what to do with them. And traditional art galleries weren't selling those kind of things. And so they'd put it on eBay, and Matthew would just buy it. And then also he discovered.
And what he didn't buy, I have in the meantime. eBay's done very well on my Margaret obsession.
Yeah, there's a subworld of the people who ripped off the Keens. And so he started collecting all those. And so he had this gigantic collection, and he was always telling me that, oh, you guys should do a movie about it. But I really was just like, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure about those paintings. And then Scott and I were doing a rewrite on a film that wasn't a true life story. It was about it took place in outer space, of all things. It took place in outer space, and some pop culture stuff from Earth landed in a time capsule on their planet. And the people on that planet thought this was what Earthlings were like. And so Scott and I were doing a deep dive into pop culture stuff from the 50s and 60s that could be in this time capsule. And Scott was reading up about the Keens, and he really found out about this whole story about did she, the court case. And Scott was like, oh my God, this could be a movie. And Scott and I, we went and we tracked down Margaret Keen. And it took us a long time to sort of win her trust. She's a very personal, quiet person, and she had been actually, ripped off by some people who tried to do a project with her earlier, and so she was very kind of distrustful, as you can imagine, with what she's gone through. But so we went up and talked to her and interviewed her and gained her trust, because often we can make our films without the rights, but because we wanted to use the real Margaret Keene's artwork, we knew we'd have to get her to go along with the project. And once again, her main thing was like, when you tell the story, will people know that I was really the painter? And we were like, absolutely. Even when we were making the movie, she was really concerned that after all this time, people still credited Walter for the paintings. And we just had to tell her over and over again and let her read the script and let her really know that, no, we are really saying very strongly that you are the painter. There's no way you can even interpret it any other way. And really, she only had strangely enough, she only had one caveat for us getting the rights, is that she was a very devout Jehovah's Witness. And she said, like, you have to include me being a Jehovah's Witness in the movie. And at first, Scott and I were like, oh my gosh, how are we going to work that in? And we just embraced it because we thought it was actually kind of a very, something, we liked, one of the reasons we like doing true life stories is because sort of truth is stranger than fiction. And certainly a regular Hollywood movie doesn't have a person becoming a Jehovah's Witness in the last half hour and changing their lives. This isn't something Hollywood kind of does. And so we actually thought it was, I think it's a beautiful moment in the movie when those ladies come and knock on the door. And I think most audiences watching the film say, where is this going? And it actually gives her confidence in her own self and allows her to, we went through a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, their information, their tracks, their stuff like this, trying to find something we could latch onto. And one of their main things is you have to tell the truth. You have to tell the truth. You have to tell the truth. So we allowed that to really be, Margaret's guiding point from that point on, along with her daughter.
There's a wonderful interview.
The day before writing the scenes for the Jehovah's Witness, I was driving to my office. And I saw some really well-dressed people walking up my road, and they had like a suitcase with them. And I was like, I think those are Jehovah's Witnesses. So I pulled over my car and I was like, are you guys Jehovah's Witnesses? Like, yes, we're out knocking. I'm like, can I have some things? And they were just handing me things. They had never had incoming before. They were usually knocking on doors and asking people to take their stuff. They'd never had anyone like desperately asking them to please give me more and more stuff.
There's a wonderful interview that I found on eBay that came out in an art magazine just before the wide release of the film in 2015. She ends with talking about how she wants to dedicate the last part of her life. So she died 2 years ago at the age of, how old? 96, I think. Anyway, she was up there. So in 2015, she said she wanted to dedicate the last years of her life to the kingdom beyond, and specifically donate her works of art to kingdom halls and spiritual worship around the world of Jehovah's Witnesses. So for her to ask that and for you to honor that really does speak to where her heart was and how she was using your arrival in her life to give her this last chance to give back to the spiritual side of her.
One of the things I think was really interesting, because when she became a Jehovah's Witness, she no longer wanted to paint those sad children because those sad children were really a part of her when she was sad in her life. And so she would only do sad paintings really on commission. You had to, someone would have to come to her and say, I really want you to paint a traditional sad Keene for me. But the thing that I love about our what we did with the movie, and it's sort of a little bit, we did it with Ed Wood as well, in that, it's very easy for people to snicker at Margaret's work or snicker at Ed Wood's films and things like this. But particularly with Margaret, the reason they're snickering is because those children make no sense when they're being painted by Walter Keene. There's no personal connection between those images and that man, and so they seem to be totally kitsch and kind of silly. But once you realize that those children are crying and those women are suffering, it's coming from a true place inside Margaret's soul because she's being locked away and treated so badly. Then it becomes the pieces of true, maybe folk art or so, just true personal statements. And so it's kind of hard to laugh at a Keene. after you know her true life story.
And that's the thing that in the piece that Amanda Wall wrote for one of our writers, we called it our retribution, where we show the still that Leah took of that moment when Walter tries to stab John Kennedy with the fork. We don't show, it's not a picture of Walter, it's a picture of John Kennedy, who, in my opinion, is in some ways more of a villain than Walter was, because he represented the legitimate world. And it reminded me so much of those blind auditions that they do now in the music world, especially in the classical music world, where you have to audition behind a screen and then they select the artist, and they don't know what the race or gender or anything about. They're just listening to the music. And so it used to be thought in classical music that women weren't good musicians, but then once they put up the blind, all of a sudden, so just as Larry just said, and this was, let me just say, I tackled him at the doorway, and then he accepted my Facebook friend request, and we've been communicating ever since. And I really was struck by that. I really was struck by the fact that John Kennedy was so enraged by Walter that he couldn't see my philosophy background, the ding on Zick, the thing in itself. He could not appreciate in any way the art because he was totally blinded by Walter, by his hatred of Walter. And in a way you can forgive that, but in that article, Retribution, I also have something from 1992 published in the home section of the New York Times, where they're making fun in 1992 of Margaret's return to San Francisco. So, John Kennedy represents the worst of being a critic, and the New York Times has enabled.
One of the other things I like to say about the reason why at least I did the project was that, when the movie came out, like I said, it was before the Me Too movement, and a lot of the male critics particularly would say, why would she put up with this? Why would she, oh, I couldn't take it. She just was abused by this person, and why would this woman do this? And I came, my mother was married to my father for 20 years. And, this is from the 50s to the early 70s. And, my father really did treat my mother horribly. But she was, a good Catholic woman, and she was not, for her, getting divorced was not allowed, not completely out of the question. So she stuck with it the way Margaret did for year after year after year. And finally, one night in the middle of the night, she grabbed us and threw her in the back of a car and took off. And so I felt a personal connection to at least the first part of Margaret's story.
And the priest telling her, which is
1,000%, 1,000%,
which is also what happens in the Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. If looping back to my introduction before you got on, of what got me into this whole support women artists fixation of mine, but just that the clergy and the law enforcement and everything at the time, there's been circulating on Facebook this week. You may have seen that this week was the 50th anniversary of a woman having the right to open her own charge account.
Yeah.
So,
like my mother did not have her own bank account. That was madness.
Mm-hmm. So you're forcing us to look at the 50s again at exactly the moment when we're being told that we want to make America great again. You're reminding us of who great for who. Thank you. We go on our campaign trip. Well,
Someone had asked what the budget was of the film. Leah, what was the budget of this movie? 12 million? 10? I mean, it was for Tim Burton. It was a very, 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 very low budget movie.
So what made Tim interested in doing this with you? How did he enter the picture? How did you get from your permission from Margaret to pursue the project to making it a Tim Burton film?
Scott and I, we wrote the script on our own. We initially wanted to direct it ourselves. It had several false starts, including one where we were going to direct Reese Witherspoon and Ryan Reynolds in the roles. And Reese got pregnant and had to drop out, and the film kind of fell apart. And we were, because of Derek had helped us bring in Tim Burton as a producer. He was going to produce the film. And just time was going by, and at a certain point, we felt like as the film was starting to lose a little momentum. You know, it's like sometimes you got to make the movie when it should be made, and we just felt like Tim might be, you know, the way like Ed Wood was a refresher, kind of a amuse bouche for Tim Burton in the middle of all his Batman blockbusters. We thought maybe Tim would want to try another one, and he really responded to, because Tim was the two people who collected Margaret Keenes in the the 90s were Matthew Sweet and Tim Burton. Tim Burton really he commissioned a painting of his son from Margaret, and so he was actually a big fan of that art. And so it hit him at the right time. And Christoph Waltz coming on board was actually another thing. He just won 2 Oscars. He was not nominated for Best Supporting Actor for this movie. They were both nominated for Golden Globes, and Amy won, and the song from Lana Del Rey was nominated, but there were no Oscar nominations from this film, I think.
But there was a WGA nomination for you and Scott, if I'm right?
Independent Spirit Award.
Oh, IP. Okay, sorry. I can't keep all of senior brain.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, no, but again, it was just I was beyond enraged when Amy Adams, who had, as Larry just said, won the Golden Globe Award in the comedy and musical category. So, you know, people might associate it with the Barbie business of not taking something seriously, even though, again, you start with more comic elements, but by the end, it's so clear that Walter is terribly out of control, and in a way that you would feel sorry, you know, again, almost like Trump in that he has to make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it explodes in his face, you know.
And people have a hard time believing that he actually did cross-examine himself at the court. I mean, it's almost, believe it or not, it's almost toned down in the film from what happened in real life, and maybe that's a fault of the film. The film actually probably toned it down a little bit more even, but Walter, the second half of Walter's life, he really was spinning wildly out of control. He wrote his own autobiography that is just jaw-dropping, full of lies and madness and ramblings. And I don't recommend anyone to read it, but if you did happen to read it, you just would have your jaw would be on the floor for the entire read. And yet,
when we were here for the Q&A, which was, again, for the critics in November or December, probably December of 2014, before people were putting in their Oscar nominations and 10 Best and everything, I was a member at that time of NIFCO, New York Film Critics Online, and so I was a voter at that time, which I am not now post-pandemic by choice. But anyway, that's my story. What I want to say is that a guy in the audience that night got up and said that he did not think you had been fair to Walter and that you didn't let Walter tell his side of the story. And so I opined about that moment online.
Yeah.
It's true. No, did that happen much?
The one thing I will say that, you know, it's a very unusual script and a very unusual movie in that Margaret is clearly the lead. Margaret is the emotional person in charge of the movie, but Walter is the engine of the story and the plot, because he won't stop talking. He won't stop running the show. And even Margaret in real life says things like, you know, that Walter was a monster, but her art would have never gotten out to the world if it wasn't for Walter. I mean, Walter was a capitalist. Walter was a salesman. He could sell anything. He should have been a car salesman or something. But so the fact that he was not an artist and he wanted so desperately to be an artist, it makes him very, very such a sad character. But his ability to capitalize on this movement and start a movement, you know, and that's really, I think, what John Kennedy was revolting against in his hatred of the Keenes' work. I almost think it was probably less about the Keenes' work than the more about how the fact that Walter had done this commercialization of the art world. Walter took Margaret's art and did and wasn't being accepted in galleries, and he did an end run around the entire, which I think is also kind of phony, but the entire art world, that art system, and and wound up like becoming multi-millionaire doing it. And so I think a lot of the people in the art world, were just aghast. The fact that Walter could go on the Tonight Show and almost sell the art directly to the country, as opposed to having to go to MoMA or Gagosian.
Yeah, it's what I refer to now as the Weinstein paradox. I mean, when I go to film retrospectives now, if I want to see Frida, if I want to see The Piano, if I want to see Cider House Rules, some of the greatest movies, some of Shakespeare in Love, I believe. So for a certain period of time, the best women's roles were in films that, when you go to see The Piano now, and the first thing that comes up is Miramax, as we all experience today, the first thing we saw as our ticket to entry to the experience of Margaret Keane was the Weinstein Company. And so, how do we deal with that and the paradox of that, and Walter being the one who recognized Margaret's talent and told her she was selling herself short. So this is a tremendous paradox that we all experience now after the final truth of the revelations of the Me Too movement. And it would be such a shame to go back. Now I'm being political again. But yeah, I mean, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about seeing the Weinstein Company?
It's absolutely horrible. I mean, Harvey, we all knew Harvey was a complete bully, even at the time, but we didn't know the absolute depth of his depravity. But he was supportive of he was the only person in town really wanting to make the movie. So you go to that. But once again, we witnessed none of the things that he is currently serving in prison in. But it is bizarre and ironic that, like just what you said, that it is a Weinstein production. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, I loved all of Leah's photos. But when I go through my photo album, sometimes it's like the only picture I have of myself with Lana Del Rey is me, Harvey, and Lana Del Rey. So it's a photo that will never see the light of day in any way, shape, or form.
So this is the paradox that we all live with in the age of information, disinformation. I mean, this is the truth, and so people are going to tell you that you didn't represent Walter's point of view, or you exaggerated who Walter was, and meanwhile, what you're showing is him not only intimidating Margaret and Jane, but literally trying to murder them by throwing matches into a room full of paint and.
True story. True story. I mean, Scott and I, like I said, our duty is to make drama out of these true life things, but we really love to stay as close as possible to actual events. And so, when you're taking someone's life or 10 years of their life and condensing it into an hour and 45 minutes, obviously there are going to be 10,000 billion things that are omitted. But a lot of the stuff that we leave in, we turned it into dramatic things, but the actual event themselves took place. There's very little in this movie that did not actually take place.
Well, Leah, as I promised you, the hour was going to go by in a flash. Do you have anything you'd like to say to everybody here? And this is, we're live streaming today all around the world, and then this will be on YouTube. The intro with Millie and Stephanie, and then the post film part Q&A with Larry and Leah. This will be on YouTube, and we're also making plans now to work with Herflix to put Big Eyes Up for anybody who wants to watch the film. So we have plans underway. All of it's going to be on YouTube. And Leah, do you have any last words?
We want to hear your voice.
Oh, thank you. No, I just wanted to say it's been an honor to be here and share some of my photos and, some of the really amazing women that worked on this film. Yeah, stories of them.
Larry, last words?
I'll second that. I love the fact that you've shown a spotlight on some of the women behind.
Larry's daughter is a filmmaker, by the way.
My daughter is a producer as well. She produced the HBO miniseries Scenes from a Marriage, and she produced the Boots Riley TV show that's on Amazon right now. I'm a Virgo. But Lynette Howell is was a huge champion of this movie, and I love her so much, and she's just a great person. And my last comment would simply be thank you, Jan. I mean, once again, you were the biggest champion. You still are the biggest champion this film has. So, thank you so much, and keep on doing it.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you know this, but one of the things that we've been doing annually starting last year with our tribute to Loretta Lynn is that we pick a woman who's recently deceased in the last year to have a musical tribute. And this year, of course, our tribute is to Tina Turner. So we're going to give the last words to Tina Turner. And please turn up the Pandora of our tribute to Tina Turner, which will also be on YouTube next week. What's love got to do with it? Well, if we all love each other, then love's got everything to do with it. So thank you so much for coming today. This is a 10-year dream come true. And Tina, bye-bye, everybody. Have a great evening. Thank you both so much. Thank you so much.
You must understand, the touch of your hand makes my pulse react. That it's only the thrill of boy meeting girl, opposites attract. It's physical, only logical. You must try to ignore that it means more than that. Oh, what's love got to do with it? What's love but a second-hand emotion? What's love got to do with it? Who needs a heart when a heart can be broken?
Okay, so do you have any questions about Swan Day?
Well, I want to just learn more because I've never seen this film,
Okay.
for example.
So why did I pick this film for this year? Okay, so this is the 10th anniversary of the release of Big Eyes. How many people have already seen it? Okay, so a few of you have. It did not get the reception that I believed it should have gotten. I was extremely annoyed that Amy Adams was not even nominated for an Oscar for this role. You can argue with me about that after you've seen it. But it's important that it came out just on the cusp of the Me Too movement. And I firmly believe that if it had come out a couple of years later, it was a harbinger. So you'll see this movie, and now we've all gone through this whole business with the Me Too movement and the backlash against the Me Too movement. And now we have Elon Musk up there saying that, DEI women pilots are causing the problems at Boeing and crazy things like this.
Oh, wow.
But you didn't know that?
Oh, I do not read some things.
This movie tells a story, and later at the end, when I do the Q&A with Larry, the screenwriter, you'll appreciate even more the challenge that they had getting this movie done, even when Tim Burton agreed to direct it, and then the disappointment that it didn't receive the reception that I think it deserved. And I want your opinions on how it plays now that we've been through 2016, we've been through one Trump term, and we're potentially on the cusp of a second Trump term. So I think this movie and the story that it tells is more relevant than ever. And I actually met Larry here at SVA. So I'm going to leave that for the Q&A, and I believe it's a quarter of. So what do you want to know about Swan Day? You talk and I'll...
Okay, so how did this come to fruition? Or it's the Sweet 16, yes?
This is the Sweet 16.
This is the Sweet 16, and I want to know why I haven't heard about it. But a big applause, first of all, that it is happening.
It's happening, and
it's
we're
happening.
here.
Support women artists now.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. So A lot of you already know this story, but for those of you that are out there in cyberspace, a long time ago, I was in Chicago, and this is a time when the Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood was just about to be released, and Callie Khouri was the director of the Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. Callie Khouri had won an Oscar for her screenplay for Thelma and Louise, and normal trajectory in the biz is if someone who wants to be a filmmaker and wants to direct gets an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay, it's a very normal trajectory that the person has new opportunities opening up for them. But Callie Khouri didn't seem to have any new opportunities opening up for her. So finally, she got the opportunity to do Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood 10 years later. And the week before it was released, there was an article in the New York Times, and the article was like, why has it taken Callie Khouri such a long time? Well, maybe women just don't want to make the sacrifices that are entailed in being filmmakers because it's such a hard job. Yes, this is where we were 20 years ago. So I immediately dashed off a letter to the New York Times, to the editor of the New York, which I had never done before. But I was so incensed that I wrote a letter to the New York Times. And then I went off to this AAUW convention. I was very active in AAUW-Illinois, which is why we are raising money in our raffle. So please buy a raffle ticket during the break for AAUW, which is really the mother of all of this, AAUW-Illinois. And I went off to the conference, and when I came back from the conference on Sunday afternoon, Richard, my husband, and Dorothea, my BFF, who's in Chicago right now doing the twin event at Chicago Cultural Center. Yes. They were standing in Dorothea's apartment with a copy of the New York Times, and the New York Times had printed my letter. I was like, what? I mean, this is like not even getting hit the second time by lightning. To write your first letter to the New York Times and have it published is like something that never happens. And I had dissed them, which doesn't happen even more. And I had said, well, who are the film critics that you have covering film for the New York Times, And then I listed them, and they were 3 guys. And I would bet that if you had more women film critics who were relating to the work of women filmmakers, you might have more women in the audience involved. And not only did they publish my letter, but 3 months later, they hired Manohla Dargis. So a double win. She's never sent me a thank you letter. I don't even think she even knows about this, but Anyway, so then at the next AAUW meeting, Kim Basinger, who was just installed as president of AAUW-Illinois, she said to me, Jan, I want you to do a project, because this sounds like a great project. And I was named Director of College and University Relations, and the board allocated budget money for me to run around to campuses all around Illinois and tell them about this great project. And so we fussed about what the name of this project should be. And I said, there's only 2 criteria for the name of the project. It has to be sayable, like UNICEF, like what does UNICEF mean? So and this is all posted on my website, the how we got our name. And I had a little committee, and we were bouncing around names, and we came up with various names. And my first one was COWITA, Coalition of Women in the Audience. And my BFF, again, Dorothea at Chicago Cultural Center, Dory, she says, no, we can't be COWITA because then they'll call us the cows, and we don't want to be called the cows. Okay, so we kept saying, plus it turned out that COWITA was a very conservative organization that already had a website with that acronym, so it's like good that we didn't pick COWITA. So then we got to WITASWAN, Women in the Audience Supporting Women Artists, and we were like, but it kind of sounds like a little like we're riffing on a Native American thing, like no. And then this woman on the team said, I had a dream last night that if we put an N on the end of WITASWAN, we could all be swans. And I was like, there we go. So as often happens, inspiration at the last minute, by the time of the conference, which was October 2nd of 2004, so almost exactly 20 years ago, we had jewelry, we had a logo, and we were swans, and that was the origin. So really, You know, this all evolved from that moment, and I worked a lot with with Alyssa Schoenberger over here. We tried to write a grant to the Chicago Foundation for Women, and they were like, "Well, give us itemize of all your other donors," and we were like, "Thank you." Richard Miller and, you know, my husband. Anyway, so that's the start of all of this. Yes.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Very.
And here
thank
we
you.
are. And here we are.
Thank you for that.